The first model I want to texture is this old clay pot. Right now it just has the basic gray V-Ray material applied, and what we want to achieve is something more like this, but with some additional features. So I want to take this, this is a rough guide. I also want to add some chipped edges, some green moss growing on these upwards facing surfaces, and maybe some discolorations from water on this bottom part of the model. Okay, so let's break it down into layers. So we have our clay, old clay layer. Okay, then we have a layer of this algae or moss. Alright, so if we want to add some chipped edges, I want to do that with displacement. And if you look at this reference photo, you can see that the basic surface looks different than the one in these chipped areas. So I think we should probably split that into another layer as well. So the reflections are different, the diffuse is different, everything is different. So that's gonna be clay clean. And maybe let's add another layer for this mud that is on top of the clay itself. We could do it as a part of our old clay layer, but I think I'm gonna go with a different layer just to make it easier to adjust. And that's gonna be mud. So we have 4 different layers, and I think the clay clean should be the last one. So these chips are on top of everything else. The mud should probably be below the moss, and I think the order looks okay. Okay, so now let's look for some patterns. So the diffuse pattern for our old clay is basically a mix of all sorts of different colors and different patterns, and I don't think it's the best idea to do this in 3D Max. I think this is an example where you would probably go to Photoshop to create this base. Okay, I'm gonna copy this image and I'm gonna launch Photoshop. Right, let's make a new image file and paste this image. I'm just gonna use it to pick some colors from. Right, and let's create a new texture. I think 2K will be enough. And let's start by filling it with some base color. Right, that's our base. Okay, maybe this one's a bit better. So now let's open some of our masks and try to combine them into something interesting. And take this one, this one, this one, maybe this one, and why not this one? All right. Right, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna paste it over my image. And since these masks are tileable, I'm just gonna make sure the size fits, and it should tile pretty well. And let's make these patches a bit lighter than the rest. So let's set that to lighten and reduce the opacity down to something like 7%. Right, maybe let's add some okay, this one doesn't work that well. Okay, this one might be better. Let's copy it, let's paste it, and it's pretty small, but I'm just gonna increase the size so it fits perfectly. And let's go for something like multiply but reduce the opacity to maybe 25%. Right, not bad. And then I'm gonna move on to this one. Copy. And for this one I'm gonna use a different technique. I'm gonna fill this layer with a color. Let's say this brighter yellow. So let's create a new layer and fill that with this color. Create a mask. Alt click on the mask and paste the image. And now just free transform it to fit perfectly. It snaps right into place. And now when you alt click again, you can see the image with the mask applied. Okay, and I think I'm gonna adjust the mask with some curves. Okay, that's nice. And maybe reduce the opacity a bit. Okay, not bad. And I think we want to add some darker patches as well. And for example, let's use this Dirt 11. Copy, paste over here, free transform to fit. And again, I'm going to set it to multiply and reduce the opacity a little bit. Okay, not bad. Maybe let's add one more color. Now let's say this sort of orange-red. So a new layer. Fill that with this color, and I'm going to use this mask. And again, alt-click, paste. Free transform to fit. And that's perfect. Okay, let's invert the mask by pressing Ctrl I and adjust with some curves. Okay, not bad, but I'm gonna move it down a bit. So this becomes the second layer. And let's reduce the opacity a little bit. Alright, so now it's starting to look like something. And let's save it and see how it looks on the model. Okay, clay, diffuse, save it, and go to 3D Max. Right, I'm going to use the slate material editor, and for the Vera material I'm going to assign a bitmap into the diffuse slot. And that's the clay diffuse. Let's see it on our model. And looks like we need to increase the tiling a bit to make it a bit smaller. 2 by 2, maybe 2.5 by 2.5. It sort of looks okay. I think that's a decent start, but there are a couple of things I want to do to this diffuse color. The first one is I want to add some ambient occlusion or some dirtier patches along these occluded areas. So let's run this bitmap through NVIDIA Dirt. And this bitmap is going to be the unoccluded areas, and the rest is going to be black. So let's see how that looks. Let's make it stronger. So first of all, let's increase the radius. Okay. Not bad, but I want to make it a bit stronger. And this is where we have a little problem. If I run the whole thing through an output map, what happens is I also mess up my original bitmap. So I'm just going to show you how it looks. So let's say I run the VRider through an output map and increase the contrast a bit. Make those blacks stronger. And what happens is the whole thing gets messed up. And we don't really want that. What we want is we want the output to affect only the VRider. So I'm gonna use a different approach here. I'm gonna disconnect my bitmap and I'm gonna use this whole node as a mix amount. Okay. And now I can adjust my VRider exactly to my liking. Increase the subdose a bit. And now I can use this mask. I'm just going to swap those colors around so it's a bit easier to understand. All right, and I'm going to use it as a mix amount, and I'm going to use my bitmap in the first color slot, and the second color is going to be simply black. All right, and here you can see the final result. The dirt is quite too strong, so I'm going to make it a bit weaker. And that's more realistic now. Okay, so that's good. Now I want to add some other details to my diffuse, and that is this discoloration from water coming up from the bottom, like here. And I think the best way to do this is by using some gradient to mask out this lower area. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the UVW map modifier, make sure it's oriented vertically, and it fits my ways. And then I'm going to use a composite map right here. Okay, let's leave that mix as our first layer, and for the second layer, we're going to add some let's start with a basic mix of two light colors. Okay, let's go back. Let's set up a mix with two whitish colors, something like you can see in this area here. So beige, whitish, okay, like that. Copy, paste, make a bit different, and mix them together with a bitmap. Let's say let's set this one Okay, looks fine. Maybe we can even increase the tiling a little bit. Okay, that's better. Right, and that's the second layer. And I'm gonna use a mask here. That's gonna be a gradient. So let's see the gradient in our model. And right now it looks exactly like I want it to. White areas on the bottom. I'm gonna make the second color black as well to bring down the effect to the lower area. And if you render now, you're gonna see that we have some white patchy colors on the bottom. But I want to make it a bit streakier, a bit more like in this example here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mix some things together to create a different mask from this gradient. So basically I'm gonna use a mix map, and I'm gonna use the gradient as the mix amount. And in these white areas, I'm gonna set up a texture right here. And I think this one is gonna work fine. And this is how it looks right now. Right, one thing I forgot to do is set my UVW map to the second channel. And set my gradient to the second channel as well. That should fix that. Okay, let's go back to our bitmap. And looks like we need to rotate it. And it's easy to do right here in the material editor by changing the rotation angle to 90 degrees. Alright, let's increase the tiling a bit. I think that's good. Maybe let's offset it downwards. Okay, so this is how my mask looks right now. Okay, that's a bit wrong. To see exactly how the mask looks, we can use this TextMap preview script. And I think it's not too bad. So let's look how everything looks together. Not bad, but I want to make this map stronger. And to make it stronger, we're gonna run it through an output. Okay, so here's our output map. And let's enable color map and brighten it up a bit. Like this. Okay, not bad. I'm gonna adjust the bitmap a little bit, maybe tiling 2 by 2. Okay, that looks fine. Right. Let's go back to our composite map, create a new layer, and I'm gonna drag that up. And I'm gonna use my, okay, sort of messed everything up. Okay, let's go back to our composite layer and okay, that looks fine. And I want this layer to be the third one. For some reason it doesn't look right. Okay, now everything looks good. Okay, some glitch in the editor, that's alright. So everything looks good. I'm gonna copy this mask, paste it here, and here I'm gonna use V-Ray color. Basically just something pretty dark. And what I'm going for is this darker discoloration, extending a bit further than the white color. So let's go for a dark brownish color. Okay. And for that mask, we're gonna go to our gradient. And show it in viewport. Right. And I want to move it slightly upwards. Like that. And that's basically it, and it should give a darker edge over in there. Maybe let's also adjust the map. By moving it slightly upwards. And maybe slightly reducing the tiling to make it slightly larger. Okay, good enough. Okay, so back to our composite map, change that to multiply and set it 50. And let's see how it looks. And I think that's not bad. Alright, so that's the diffuse. Let's move on and let's set up some reflections. And for the reflections, I think I'm just going to use a bitmap. Nothing special, something like this maybe. Okay, let's zoom in and see how it looks. Basically, those reflections are pretty blurry, something like 0.45 or so. If you look at some examples, you will see no sharp reflections. Enable Fresnel, add something like 2. And the map is a bit too strong, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mix it with this black color in this slot by reducing the amount here. Okay, but I also want to see how the map looks on the object, and it seems that we need to increase the tiling a bit. That's better. Let's render. Not bad. Maybe let's make those reflections a bit patchier by copying the map to the reflection glossiness slot as well. And I'm going to set it at 50. Alright, that's much better. Okay, so now we have the diffuse, we have the reflections, we have the glossiness, and now let's just set up some bump. Okay, so first of all I want to add a noise to my bump slot. And for the noise, let's see how it looks. Let's make it much smaller. Check how it's... okay, the viewport is a bit big. So it's best to preview with this text map preview script. Okay, I like the size. I like the noise, so let's add some additional detail to bump. by adding another map. So just set up some mix. And in the second color slot I'm going to use a bitmap. And why not use something like this? I think I want to invert it. So you can go to output and just check the invert option. Alright, so back to mix, set it at 50 for now. See how it looks. Not bad at all. Maybe make the noise slightly more contrasty by playing around with the threshold values. And preview again. Alright, looks great. And let's render and see how it looks on the model. I think it looks quite good. Maybe the bump is a bit too strong. I'm gonna reduce it to 15. And maybe the glossiness is a bit too high, so let's reduce the reflection glossiness to 0.3. And now I think I'm pretty happy with my base layer. Okay. So let's lay out children. And this is how the base layer looks. What I want to do next is I want to create a new V-Ray blend material. Okay, and this one is going to be the base layer. Right, let's make sure I assign the blend material. And let's now create the first coat. And the first coat, as we remember, is the mud. So basically some muddy looking diffuse. Maybe I'm just going to use some noise here. Muddy looking diffuse, fractal noise, lots of levels, and a bit higher contrast. Okay, looks decent. Let's just swap the colors for something a bit more like mud. Not bad. Okay, that's the diffuse. For the reflections, let's use something like, I don't know, maybe this. Okay, not bad. And let's reduce the reflection glossiness quite a bit. 0.4. And set up Fresnel at maybe 2. Okay, great. I'm going to copy my reflect map and I'm going to paste it in my bump slot. And I'm going to increase the tiling to 2 by 2. And let's reduce the blur. Okay. So let's see how this layer looks. I'm going to assign this material to my object. And looks pretty muddy. Maybe a bit more saturation is needed. I'm going to slightly reduce the bump, and I'm going to change my noise colors to something a bit more saturated. not bad. Right, so that's the mud layer. Let's go back to our blend material and let's set up a blend amount map. And I think this bitmap might be perfect for it. Okay, let's just increase the tiling to maybe 3 by 3 and play around with the offsets until we have some splatters right where we want them. Alright, that's fine. And let's see how it looks now. It's not bad, but I think the bump is too strong. I also want to move it a bit in this direction here. Okay, so go to our mud layer and reduce the bump to 10. Not bad. Okay, so we have our first 2 layers ready. And now let's set up on the third one. And the third one is gonna be, again, I'm gonna basically, let's copy this mud layer and change it up a little bit. So the colors are gonna be something greenish. Looks nice. Okay, this looks okay. And maybe let's reduce the bump. Something like 2. Make it smoother. And let's reduce the reflectivity. 50%. Okay, so back to our blend material. And let's connect this one to coat number 2. So this is how it looks right now, and what we need to do is set up a mask for this layer. And here I'm going to use a fall off map and set it towards the way, world Z axis, and here you can see the preview. Looks like we need to change the fall of colors around, add some points here and adjust the transition. Okay, not bad. We have it right where we want it. Maybe the colors are a bit wrong. More saturated and more towards the brown. Okay, that's better. I like the color. And now let's add the map to our fall off. That makes it look a bit more natural. So basically the same procedure as before. We use the fall off as our mix amount and use the mix as our blend amount. Okay, And we want the white areas to become a bit more interesting by using a bitmap. So let's say we're gonna use something like this dirt 9 or something. So this is how the mask looks. It doesn't look too great actually. Okay. Let's see the viewport. And maybe offset it upwards a bit. And I think I want to invert the whole thing. So this is our mask now. Let's adjust the colors a bit. By making the darks a bit stronger and whites as well. Okay. And let's see how the whole thing looks together. Okay, not bad. But it looks like it might be better to swap the order of our blend material layers around. So the moss is below the mud. Okay, perfect. And I also want to give additional bump to the moss by using the same mask I'm using for blend amount. I'm gonna mix it with my dirt here. I'm gonna paste an instance in case I change something. It's gonna change automatically. And let's bring up the bump strength for the moss layer. Okay, that's better. Right, so we have our first 3 layers, and now we want to add some chips. Maybe let's make the moss a bit more, a bit less visible. So there's our moss layer, there's our mask. So in the output I'm gonna drag the whites towards right. Alright, that's a bit better. Maybe let's make the noise a bit smaller. As you can see, you can tweak a lot of things here. Okay, that's good. And let's move on to our final layer, which is the clean clay. So basically I'm going to create a new layer. In my blend material, set up the diffuse as something like light clay. Set the reflections pretty low. Very blurry. 5. Okay, great. This is gonna be the third layer, and now we just have to create a mask for it. And to create a mask, we're gonna use the tension modifier. Okay, turn off these compression, expansion and reference pose options and toggle on the vertex colors. And basically we don't really need the reds, so we can change that to 0. And we want the contrast of the greens to be stronger. Maybe something like this will work. Okay, so let's create a new map. And it's gonna be a mix map where we're gonna use vertex colors as the mix amount. Okay, sorry, vertex color as the mix amount. And we're gonna use the green channel. Right. So let's see how it looks. How it looks on our model. I'm just gonna quickly create a new area material to test it out. And render and see. Not bad, but I think we can increase the contrast a bit. Okay. So first, in the white color slot, I'm gonna set up a bitmap. I think this one can be used. All right. 3 by 3 or something. And let's see how the mix looks right now. Okay, good. And let's run the whole thing through an output map. Okay, and in the output map, enable color map and make the white stronger. Okay, perfect. And that's our mix amount, blend amount for this third layer. Just have to assign the material. Okay, so you can see the color of those chipped areas, but you cannot see any chips themselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new composite map, which I'm going to use for creating some displacement. And in this composite map, I'm going to set up my first layer as some basic noise. Say fractal, 3, maybe 8 levels, and maybe a bit more contrasty. And for the second layer, I'm going to use my output map right here. Okay. And the goal here is to add this noise only to the white areas of my output map. Okay, maybe like that. This looks fine. And finally, let's add a displace modifier, or a V-Ray displace modifier. And now let's take this composite map and add it here in this displacement modifier as an instance. Okay, and let's just set the amount to something like -1 and test how it looks. And it seems to work perfectly. Maybe let's set it to -2 if we want a stronger effect. I think that's a bit too much, but you get the general idea. Okay, and if you wish, you can adjust the tiling of this bitmap. You can adjust the tension modifier if you wish, and it should give us some more chipped areas right now. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. So I think that's it for this material. Maybe we can take this map itself . Okay, and add an adjustment layer, curves. To make it a bit more contrasty. And resave that. Right, now I'm going to show you how you can reuse this material on a different object. So let's create, let's say, the default teapot. Basically what you need to do is to successfully reuse this material. You need to copy some modifiers. You need to copy the UVW map, the tension, and the V-Ray displacement modifier. Just copy them, paste on top of the teapot. And let's see how it looks. Okay. Okay, that's better. Make sure the UVW map fits. The rest looks good. Let's see how it looks. Right, sorry, forgot to assign the material. And something's not right, and I think the UV orientation is a bit wrong and the tiling is a bit too much. So what you can do is you can add the UVW XFAR modifier, and change the tiling a little bit. So let's set it to 0.3, 0.3, 0.3. So maybe 0.2. Okay, that's better. And then you can rotate it 90 degrees. And now you have those streaks on the bottom, and the tiling looks a bit better. Okay, the only problem I think is this moss. It's coming a bit too much towards the bottom. So you can adjust that by going to your moss layer is the number 2. Sorry, number 1. And just take that fall off and move it towards the left. And this way you can bring the moss up. And as you can see, you can easily adjust this material to reuse it for a whole different object. Let's add some more chips and see how it looks now. Right.